Please like, share, subscribe.
For 25 years, we've walked side by side, brothers forged in the Marine Corps. And when the call came, we chose to walk with God. This is our journey. Welcome to the Not of This World podcast.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Not of This World podcast. I'm your host, Josh, here with Steve and Trevor. If you guys have seen some of our previous episodes, Trevor is a guest that we had on, and we just felt like he had a lot of great stuff to say. So we're going to be bringing him on the show more often, and if his schedule aligns, permanently. So welcome Trevor aboard. This is episode number 43. We've got some great topics for you today. We're going to be getting into the shooting of our attempted shooting of our president, which is some pretty major news, and kind of some inconsequential reactions to it, I guess, in the world. Also, Trevor's got a segment he wants to talk about with boomers and how the Bible relates to that. And I believe we're going to be getting into some armor of God or the devil. We'll see which direction we go with that. But with that being said, I wanted to start us off with a Bible verse today. I'm going to open us with 2 Corinthians 4:4. The God of this age, Satan, blinds the minds of unbelievers so they cannot see the light of the gospel. I wanted to start with that one as we go into this segment on the Trump shooting. And it's just a reminder to me of how the devil is always prowling around and how he is controlling this world. And with all of the chaos and evil and craziness happening in our world, how we can almost be blinded to it, to the point that we begin to not care. So with that being said, Steve, did we want to roll right into it? I think we're going to begin with a little clip this morning.
Yeah, I have a clip ready for us. I just, the reason why this even came about was because the Trump, I don't know if we're calling it an assassination attempt, without all the details being provided, because Josh, I don't think you know as much as maybe Trevor does, and I know less than Trevor does, and so it's going to roll downhill from here. But to me, at least, like none of us even messaged each other to say, "Hey, did you hear about this?" And like we have other friends that, like, in the past, when these things happen, it would be like, "Dude, did you know this?" Like when Charlie Kirk passed, it was like immediately, "Did you hear about this? Did you hear about this?" We're getting numb, and I was kind of like looking back and be like, "How did we get to the point where this isn't news anymore?" So I'm going to roll that clip right now.
Breaking news just into our newsroom this morning. Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide overnight. ABC News reporting he was found dead in his lower Manhattan jail cell. He was the disgraced millionaire who was facing federal sex trafficking charges. He was set to stand trial next year for allegedly abusing dozens of minor girls in New York and Florida.
The league said in part, quote, the NBA is suspending gameplay following the conclusion of tonight's schedule of games.
Tonight, as cities across the country turn convention centers into hospitals, beaches into isolation parks, new anecdotes of the virus spreading explosively, like, quote, a bomb. In Washington state,
united we stand, we never fall. This perilous fight, it takes one and all. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. America.
Right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks.
You're sure of it? Because people are listening really closely to this.
Right now, people should not be walking. There's no reason to be walking around with a mask.
Camera videos from George Floyd's arrest and death.
Let me see your other hand. Please, both hands.
Do nothing. Just seconds.
We're so excited. America spoke. We won. We won.
Every vote counted. We believed in our hearts that Biden was best for the United States. And
we begin with a live look this morning as the nation's capital remains under a curfew. That's after a mob swarmed around the grounds breaching the Capitol building. But democracy still moved forward overnight, late into the night, into the early morning hours. Vice President Pence overseeing the certification of Electoral College votes.
This historic moment, the last U.S. troops have withdrawn from Afghanistan, ending America's longest war. With the Taliban we pushed out in 2001 back in control of that country again. President Biden.
A blow to the president's controversial vaccine mandate. This after an appellate court upheld its legal pause on President Biden's policy for companies with 100 or more workers to provide proof of vaccination or a weekly negative COVID test starting in January. The New Orleans.
Did we get here? The invasion began on February 24th. For months, Russia had been massing troops on Ukraine's border, but most people, including in Ukraine, didn't believe it would actually happen.
The Supreme Court has overturned Roe v. Wade, the 1973 decision that established a constitutional right to an abortion in the U.S.
Elon Musk's Twitter takeover complete. The deal, of course, will be fully done sometime this year, but after days of waiting, I mean, it wasn't even months.
Today, we're talking about ChatGPT, a state-of-the-art conversational AI model developed by OpenAI. ChatGPT is capable of engaging in human-like conversations, providing answers to questions, and even generating original content.
The subcommittee hearing on unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAPs, will come to order.
The news more grim, the images of the devastation more horrifying tonight, coming from Hawaii's Maui Island, where the death toll is rising. And
the university has given Palestinian supporters until Friday to break down their encampment at the center of that Manhattan campus after an initial midnight deadline passed.
Now to this. Critics say Biden and the woke mob are taking a swipe at Christians this Easter. This year, Easter Sunday falls on Transgender Visibility Day, which is traditionally on March 31st. But this year, not only did Fairfax County, Virginia, make an official proclamation for Easter Sunday, so did President Biden. Biden was
tonight. This is the new epicenter of the border crisis. Tiny Lukeville, Arizona, where the number of migrants is pushing Border Patrol past capacity. More than
nine. The first and only man who's held the presidency to face a felony conviction. There you see the verdict.
I'm here outside Vice President Kamala Harris's residence in Washington, D.C., after President Joe Biden announced that he is dropping his re-election bid against Donald Trump.
Keep walking!
This is Ryan Wesley Routh, the suspected gunman in the apparent assassination attempt of former President Donald Trump at Trump International Golf Club in West Palm Beach.
Waiting for it, and we do have some breaking news from the decision desk. NBC News can now project that Donald Trump has won the state of Wisconsin, which means he is the winner of this race and will return to the White House as this country's 47th president.
Right. Well, and for basically follow the money. We look at the president's executive orders. And we also just follow the money. So
we're here with reports of a shooting at Utah Valley University. The university saying in a statement that shots were fired at an event with the conservative activist Charlie Kirk, along with reports.
Dueling protests tonight in Minneapolis getting heated.
I'm 100% on board with ICE in every way.
Law enforcement on high alert as a conservative.
Indeed, Charlie was killed for expressing the very ideas that virtually everyone in this arena and most other places throughout our country deeply believed in. But
the Epstein files have just been released by the Justice Department.
And it appears that the Israelis have made the first strike. What can you tell us?
John, U.S. and Israeli forces have launched a surprise daytime attack against Iran, officials confirmed to me.
So the House Oversight Committee now demanding a briefing from the Secret Service after Saturday's close call and the third attempt on President Trump's life. Let's break it all down because we were dealing with a man on a mission. So he starts in Los Angeles, where he lives. He takes a train.
Breaking news just into our newsroom this morning. Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide overnight. ABC News reporting he was found dead in his lower Manhattan jail cell. He was the disgraced millionaire who was facing federal sex trafficking charges. He was set to stand trial next year for allegedly abusing dozens of minor girls in New York and Florida.
Do you guys think that's the day that everything changed? That Jeffrey Epstein passed or offed himself? Do you guys think that was the day that set everything in motion? There's other dates you could probably say, but it does feel like after watching all that stuff happen, like we have become desensitized, especially with social media being that we get everything in smaller increments on Shorts or TikTok. I feel like people are being programmed.
I mean, yeah, I don't know if that would be the particular event, but it would make sense. And I guess my whole thought on the entire thing, like you just showed so much insane news over the course of a 6.5 year period that, you know, let's say 50 years ago, that would be 30 years of news and there still wouldn't be that much craziness that happened. And that just happened in 6 years. Sorry, you want to say something? Let me just finish this really quick. But to me, it's all what is true and what is not true. So if we are to believe that our leaders are taking part in these disgusting, horrible actions that tied into Epstein, then yeah, I would say that is the kickoff event, because everything from there is made to pull people's minds away from what actually was happening with all this Epstein stuff. Right? So that's one avenue to go down. But if I don't believe that the leaders were involved, then I would just believe that all this crazy things just happened by coincidence, that we just live in that world. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Trevor, I was going to mention this, but I want to hear your opinion, Trevor. I did a search too of the past years before that, the exact same timeline. And like the only two things I came up with that would be worth mentioning is when Edward Snowden got labeled a traitor for exposing how our government's storing all our data online. And then Julian Assange introduced WikiLeaks and started sharing all our government secrets. Those two things got covered up pretty quickly at that time. But those are the only two events that they weren't even on the news blips really the way that they should have been. I'm like sitting there going like, this has to be the day, because there's so much happening behind the scenes with it that we're not being told about, that we're being told we will be told about. But Trevor, what do you think?
Well, regarding WikiLeaks especially, that touches base with where I started to kind of maybe wake up a little bit over a decade ago. I was actively flirting hard with the FBI to get a career with them, and was warned by several people who are close friends of mine who work for the FBI or formerly did, that WikiLeaks would be a website you never want to visit. That would be something that like the FBI would like red flag if you were then going to pursue a career with them or any agency related as such, whether NSA, CIA, or whatever. That was something at the time I thought I'd wanted to do before I started seeing things and slowly, I don't know, moved away from that desire, let's just say. My whole instinct regarding this is we've had lots of clandestine problems, in my opinion, even back to the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, and then with the Titanic, and then the Federal Reserve, the establishment, the dubious circumstances behind that, World War I and II. I mean, there's so many different things about who's really pulling strings in the world and in our country. What really you're talking about is just, it's coming down to like the end times, basically. The devil will always overplay his hand in the end. And now he's flagrantly almost testing us as a people to see, hey, here's some leaders from both political parties of your country, both Republicans and Democrats, going to Epstein Island or being associated in the files in whatever manner. Here's all these other atrocious things that are happening, whether it's Biden in office or Trump in office or whoever. What are you going to do about it? We dare you, the people, to do something about it. I truly think that's part of what this is. And then I also wonder, at the back of my mind, what are they not showing us? What are they actually actively like restricting us from knowing? Because they absolutely control what's on our phones, and they have since the Patriot Act in 2001. It was nearly unanimously passed in Congress with the shortest record of 6 weeks. In that, then they passed it right after 9/11. So again, you can ask the question: was 9/11 one of those things to kind of be able to push the Patriot Act, which basically allowed legal espionage on American citizens, or was this recent Trump attempt assassination just a means to garner sympathy because he'd just been rejected by the federal court systems that he could not build his ballroom, but now there's a reason that he needs it for safety. You know, safety is the biggest thing that we'll see flaunted as why we're going to do something or why we're going to restrict people's rights. And if you don't believe me, just look at the COVID and the lockdowns and the mask mandates and the vaccines and people losing jobs, getting kicked out of buildings because they would refuse to wear masks, or they would refuse. I have a friend that lives here, moved from California, was making incredible money in a hospital, and he refused the injection that they required him for the COVID vaccine. And so they fired him, and he just sold everything and moved to Idaho, where there was a bit more freedom depending on what part of the state you were in. But so in the back of my mind, I think two things: like it's the end times, and the devil's getting close to overplaying his hand, and Jesus is coming. And also, I secretly wonder in the back, like, what are they not showing us? Because they can absolutely restrict us from seeing things. It's not hard for them. They control all of the electronic devices and satellites and all the media, basically.
I do think it's interesting how we've had, and I'll include Charlie Kirk in this assassination attempt. The men that are behind these assassination attempts or assassinations, it's all the social media is where everyone goes directly to. And Josh, since you haven't been paying attention, this guy is a teacher from California, a high school teacher, and he left a manifesto that basically said he's really sorry that he has to do this, and that he seems highly intelligent, but he is captured by what people are being shown on news and social media. Like, he literally feels like he was doing something like stopping a Hitler type person by doing what he was going to go do. And he had on his manifesto, like, I don't want to kill innocent people. I don't want to, kill the presidential guards, anybody who, like, he went through a list of people he's going to avoid. But then he had, like, the president, the vice president, and he had a list of people he's going to go after. And the crazy part to me too that I want to mention and get your guys' thoughts on is the video that they've shown over and over again is him running through security. And if you look on that video, on the top left, it says AI, like a CapCut AI video. And it's like, why would that be the video they're using to present what happened that day? Like, even it just says AI on it, and you're like, that's a little suspicious, because immediately the first thing I saw was Trump got shot. The next video I saw was, this is all fake. And I think that's the world we live in now. We will not know the truth.
So that's exactly my my whole thought on all of it. They've created a world where there is so much fake information out in it that we don't know what to believe at all. Like, just this one news piece, like you said, why is it an AI video showing it? Was this even real? And then there's, we've been fed information that the CIA knows how to mind control people through different programs that they have. So are these, killings, like the school shootings or things like this, are they controlling someone's mind to do it on purpose? If it's even real, if this isn't a fake event that is trying to get to the next piece of news. And every single thing that happens now leaves us in this circle of distrust, where it's like, it could be this, it could be this, it could be this, it could be this. and no one can get to anything. And that to me is why we're so desensitized to it, because it's just like, I don't even know if it's real. I don't know if it was on purpose. I don't know if it's a psyop. I don't know what any of this is. What's the point in even looking?
To your point, Jeffrey Epstein was the reason I even got interested in politics, is because I could not believe this was happening in America. And Josh, you shared some of the stuff with me. I saw it first, and then you shared some more stuff with me. And you started to see Jeffrey Epstein had a painting of Bill Clinton in a dress at his on his island. And you fast forward from that point when you're like, how can that guy not be guilty, right? You fast forward from when this happened in 2019 when I found out. And if you listen to people like his manifestos, like he's calling Trump a pedo. You're like, everything's been flipped on the script to the Republicans right now, that they were playing against the Democrats last elections, our term. And it's like, they're literally picking sides and just like, okay, well, now it's your turn to be the bad guy and we're going to go after you. And it's like our government's taking turns when the only people that lose is the American people.
Which has always been the case.
Yeah.
Also, it's like the twofold thing. It's like, here's what we're seeing. So either this has got some sort of a reason, or they're testing us too. I think more and more people are starting to realize there's psyops out there, to whatever level they're starting to realize this. But also that scares me just a little, because they're either going to keep pushing the envelope to see, like, if they need us to believe the psyop, then it's going to get worse. Envelope in the sense that they know they can, and people just don't care because they think it's a psyop in some way, shape, or form. The biggest thing you need to realize too is if you're seeing something over here, the magician's trick is what's happening under the table with the other hand. That's what you pay attention to, but it's hard because how do you find that hidden stuff? So
yeah, Josh and I did a whole episode on psyops. Like, we talked about the things that, like, they're showing us that they've done to people. And so if the government's saying we're doing it, and that's not even stopping the other countries that, like China and Russia, and what are they doing to our news cycle?
Well, that's the thing. It started with the subversion campaigns from Russia and then China, where their entire mission was to put fake information out into the youth in our country to try removing God from society, and to try, making homosexuality heroic, and to try making people hate the government, and basically to slowly ruin our society to win a war. And so then you've got that aspect of it. Is this stuff actually still part of the subversion, and our government isn't as bad as we're talking about? But again, it just leads you into that circle where it's just like, I don't know. I don't know any of it. All I know is I don't like it. And I do know it's coming from the enemy. It's coming from the devil, because he is in control right now.
Trevor, do you have any final thoughts on this?
Just don't despair and don't be afraid. That's the biggest thing. Like, the devil's going to play his hand all the time. And as we get into the armor of the devil / God topic later this episode, there's a lot of power, and including discernment, in your wheelhouse as a believer, a spirit-filled believer especially. And so you don't need to despair or fear. You just need to know and try to understand what it could look like. So read Revelations, understand what that needs to look like, and know how and who you are and how to stand and fight.
Okay, I asked you guys at the beginning of that segment, like, was it the day Jeffrey Epstein passed away? Or another way you can look at it is Donald Trump his election started all of this. And ironically, Trevor, you brought the topic today of you wanted to talk about the boomer generation. And the boomer generation starts in 1946. Guess what year Trump was born? 1946. Josh, you wanted to bring a Bible verse for the boomer generation, right?
The first one's going to be Deuteronomy 5:9. So I actually have two sides to this. Deuteronomy 5:9. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me. So you know what? I've got that one, and I'm going to save the second one until we go into the actual generation curse part of it.
Perfect. Trevor, you're going to be in control on this one. You just got to let me know when you want me to play that video. So did you want to introduce anything or get right into the videos?
Well, yeah, let me talk just for a sec, and then I'll cue you for the video if that's okay. So this is just like me and my background and stuff. I did a lot of psychology courses and sociology, which is the study of humans as a group, like the group think. This was something that was just fascinating to me as I was understanding and learning languages and cultures when I was going to university over in Hawaii. And so this is some like observances I want to talk about, whether it's just from social media or just my interpersonal experiences. I wanted to just bring this up to people because there really is this strong, maybe like concern between like generations, specifically boomers to my millennials who were, I think they're like 81 to like 93 is what they consider like the years you were born if you're a millennial, which a lot of us have those boomer parents. Anyways, yeah, so when I go forward at this, after we play this video, it's not necessarily I'm trying to attack or anything. I'm going to be speaking in generality. So when I say they, that's a generality. That's not like every single boomer or every single Gen Z or Gen X or whoever. You know, it's generic, and I'm not going to quantify that going forward. So if you're going to like hold me to those exceptions, if you're a listener and you're going to be like, well, yeah, but I know this one person, like, you got to put that aside and remember, okay, Trevor's speaking in generalities. So anyways, you can go ahead and play that.
That I am seeing between the boomer generation and the millennial generation. Never before seen this. It is unbelievable.
Really?
The amount of hatred between these two generations is unbelievable. It's really bad.
So what's the core thing they're fighting about?
Betrayal. The boomer generation really is a generation that believed that the template for success was a very specific thing. They themselves made all kinds of decisions that changed the entire framework and the landscape of this world and the society in a way that would not work anymore for what they did essentially when they were 20. So they sold an idea to the millennials. The millennials followed that ideal. Because of doing so, they fell off a cliff, basically, bounced themselves straight towards two huge recessions, didn't work in relationships. So all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, I trusted you and you misled me. And now I can never get what you got. There's no hope for the future. And now you won't step out of the position that you're in, where I'm convinced you're making decisions that harmed me.
Boomers don't want to die, and they don't want to sell their homes. Boomers used to sell their homes, go to Florida, get a condo. Boomers don't want to do that. They're actually retiring, in some cases, to bigger homes. It's kind of hilarious and somewhat satanic. Everything's material. So this big house that they lord around. I mean, some of my friends' parents, I mean, I'm writing a book about them. They're hilarious. They know nothing. I mean, nothing. But they lord around these big suburban castles, and their whole sense of self-worth comes from this. It comes from materialism. So the idea that they would leave this big house, which is every argument that a boomer ever tries to win, they just point at their house. They have zero idea. They've read no books about anything. They're less really truly funny generation, I think, because everyone has becoming flattened, but they are just very funny and deeply selfish. I mean, it's funny, but they're never going to get rid of these houses. So their kids are kind of, they're being held hostage. I mean, the whole economy, I mean, Pelosi, Biden, these very old people, Mitch McConnell, they won't retire. None of them have any plans on retiring. They want to die in office. Nobody will sell their house. Nobody will step down at their job. It's just a generation of people that don't want to stop.
Our point here. All of this hedge fund here, BlackRock here, Crystal Rock over there, that's all of you guys who made this. We do crypto. We have ETH, Bitcoin. We do BlackRock. So you guys ruined the economy by making these hedge funds so high. Oh, I want to spend this much on a house. You guys inflated the economy over your lifetimes. That's right.
Well,
we just got here. We just got here.
There are plenty of millennials and Gen Zers who are now in this upper echelon of finance. So I don't think it's a boomer, it's a greed thing, because we're not going back. My parents paid $40,000 for their house in 1960 outside of Boston. It's now $2.8 million.
What? Sounds like they came.
You
just came up.
You
just hit a max win.
You guys got the method. My friend's parents paid $5,000 for their summer home in 1946. It's now worth close to $8 million.
You're proving our point. Y'all ruined the economy. Y'all ruined our economy. How can we buy homes? You guys, let me get this straight. If I want that house, I gotta pay $8.5 million. You just came up.
Thank you very much.
So they came out and announced that the housing market in the U.S. is the most unaffordable in American history. And I know a lot of people, they give Generation Z a hard time, but this is why I don't knock Gen Z. And it's because they inherited a rigged game. People like to talk shit and say they lazy, which I know a lot of them are. But at the same time, no matter how hard most of them work, they never going to be able to beat the system in this economy because they got to work 5 to 10 times harder to get the exact same life that their parents and grandparents had. And I remember talking to my uncle about this, right? He was telling me how he got his first apartment in the 80s. And he had no roommates. And he was telling me how his rent was $300 a month. His car note was $75 a month. He said he was making around like $1,800 a month. He said you could get a brand new car for around $5,000. So only making $1,800 after expenses is paid, he still got over $1,000 a month to save. Now I know a lot of people, they're gonna hear that, right? They're gonna be like, well, $1,800 a month in the 80s, that's a lot of money. But in 2025, that's only equivalent to around $65,000 to $70,000 a year. While those same expenses that I mentioned, they done 10 to 20x in some cases. So even while that person today who's making 65 to 70,000 making more money, their buying power is much weaker. So their savings is still going to be lower than that person that was making less in the 80s. Do people not understand how ridiculous that is? Which is why, in my opinion, we don't give boomers enough flack. Because after World War II, right, they inherited a booming economy, cheap education, strong union, rising wages, and they had affordable housing. They inherited all of that, but at the same time, they the generation that drove up costs, took away pensions, sent jobs overseas, crashed the housing market, and now act like young people are lazy for struggling in this economy without caring or putting any of it into context. It was a period of time in America, right, where you could work at a factory, have a family of 5, and be able to buy a home and afford to maintain this home. While today in a lot of major cities, you got people making 6 figures or close to six figures that can't afford a family. They're going to be renting forever. So it's really a real game. And I really feel it for specifically Generation Z.
I love when boomer grandparents are like, why don't you come visit us more often? You know, we're here. We're waiting for you. We got the space. And they're like, oh, but the traffic. Like, the traffic? I would kill to be in traffic without a screaming baby. They're texting me like show recommendations. Hey, have you seen this? Have you seen that? Like, yo, I have no idea what month it is. We already did that trip. You come here. That's what you do. Boomer grandparents come to us. Okay?
So when you become a grandparent, you've just got to put on the hat to the best of your ability of how can I serve? How can I add value? How can I lift burdens? How can we serve your family? Honestly, my folks and Grace's folks were great about this. They rotated every Friday. We got date night, and they were very consistent. During baseball season, they would take boys to games and help us because we had multiple games at multiple times, and there was a lot of conflict in the schedule. And now that our grandkids all live nearby, we just asked the kids, like, hey, what is a good day of the week that we could open our house? You don't have to bring anything, just drop the kids off. And so that day of the week, all the grandkids come over and we serve and they get a date. They can have, I don't know, up to 6 hours if they want. So yeah, just one of the most fun things is when your kids get older, you've got to go from telling them what to do to asking them what they need you to do to serve them.
I'm going to offend everybody. Here we go. Grab a cup of water and sit down, take some notes. The first one that really stood out to me is that materialism mindset. So you have to understand the culture of the time. There was this truly booming economy. Government jobs went through the roof. They had all these guys come back from overseas, the greatest generation and some of those silent generation ones coming up in the late 40s and 50s. So they had the infrastructure works of highways, especially being developed all around the country at that time, giving tons of federal and state and even municipal type jobs to millions of these former military, World War II vets and other men around those ages. And so when you look at just statistically speaking, government federal dollars spent and overall number of employees and state employees and federal state spending, they went through the roof. And everybody knows that government jobs are nice in the sense that they might have some layoffs and whatever, but they're usually pretty good, and they're as far as financially speaking, and pretty safe and cushy as far as obviously it's the government. So in private sectors, businesses could get bought by other businesses and then do layoffs and bring in their own people. I'm very well and acutely aware of that, growing up with my dad being laid off a minimum of at least 10 times from like the maybe late 80s through the 90s, early 2000s. My dad had like 10 to 12 different jobs, and there was always layoffs. There was a big thing in that era in Idaho where California companies would come in and buy a smaller Idaho company, lay off everybody or most people, and then bring in their own people from California. And then my dad would get a new job, and then being the low man on the totem pole, it would inevitably happen again. And so he was inevitably let go. So starting with all that materialism and consumerism, there was everybody having all these jobs. They had all this pretty stable economy, of course. The war was over. Of course, we participated in some smaller wars like Korea and then a little bit more larger one, Vietnam. But this materialism thing really started getting pushed because of like the television and the commercialism that came with it. And so people had all these things they needed to spend their money. So that first, I think it was the first or that second video where the guy's sitting down, I think he's with Tucker Carlson, and he's talking about this materialistic thing. That really became a part of the boomer culture, in my opinion. Again, this just looking at this secularly, almost like a sociologist would. You could see it with just like the way that they live, and then going later into the way they talk, they almost have to like flex. And so you remember that guy sitting down at a desk, and there was like a panel, and then he starts talking about himself or his parents and his friends buying a house really cheap, and now it's worth like 2 point whatever million dollars. And all those young guys are like reacting because like he's proving their point, because like they didn't do anything, they just bought low and happened to get like catch a good market sweep, and now they're sitting on like millions for basically doing nothing. And I've done that to a small degree too. I had a house I bought for 140 and I sold it just 2 years later for 180. 2 years, 40 grand. Didn't have to pay capital gains tax because I lived in it for 2 years minimum. So that was pretty nice. So I mean, imagine doing that with a multi-million-dollar suite. So materialism, consumerism, I don't know if you guys were flexing and like having to always just compete and compare. That's something I notice with boomers a lot. I don't know what you guys feel about that. Or
Yeah, I definitely have some opinions on this. To me, I don't know how we blame a generation. It always is at the top. And this was planned by the billionaires. The people at the top brainwashed a society into that consumerism, into that commercialism, into that materialism. They do that. And it started with the feminist movement. The feminist movement wasn't just a bunch of women wanting to do this. It was people getting together at the top and saying, how do we get the women to work so that we have two people earning income in each house, which means we can get people spending twice as much. So it really started with feminism, and it's always been a plan from the people at the top. I mean, looking at just the average American citizen, you come back from fighting in a war and you can buy a house for $5,000. Why would you not buy a house for $5,000? It's not their fault that from there everything took off because everyone had double income. Kids weren't being raised by their parents as much as they were being raised by institutions. And you took moms out of the home. And this also, I think, is where the subversion started to come in from Russia. And that's where they realized what was happening in our economy. And they're like, sweet, let's get God out of there. Let's take God out of there. Let's start bringing immorality into that society. And that's where the materialism part really took off, I think. And so like you're saying, like they feel that need to flex. That's inherent in their generation based on the way they were raised. But I think that raising is always like, it's kind of now the generation below us, they're being raised to hate each other. They're being raised for that Republicans hate Democrats, Democrats hate Republicans. So-and-so's racist, so-and-so's homophobic, so-and-so's this. They're being raised to hate. And I believe that also starts at the top because there's always an agenda. And so as us, as the average citizens in this day and age versus the average citizens 40 years ago, we need to not hate each other. And we need to constantly remember who's starting all of these problems.
Yeah, I kind of see it from both angles. I see the points Trevor's making. I see the point you're making. I do think that the people in my life that I've seen at the age where they should be retiring now, they're not selling their homes and they're not retiring from jobs. So the people who are younger than them were kind of gridlocked in these places where these homes that should be more available are becoming available. And the job market is being captured by older people in senior positions where maybe people our age are taking those positions and the people younger than us are taking the positions we're holding in our age demographic. It's just an exceptional time to talk about this too, because I think we've all been blessed too, and I don't think we did it just because God obviously had a hand in it, but I also think we came up, like, we worked harder than other people, and like I did. When Trevor asked, did I feel like I was keeping up with the Joneses? I was trying to. I felt like anytime I got some kind of means or ends to show other people, hey, I'm successful, look at what I did. The person next to me is like, well, hold my beer. I'm going to go get a bigger house than you. I'm going to get a nicer new car than you. And generationally, it's tough because these kids are inheriting a very tough market to buy a house in. So for us as parents who are looking at our kids, like, my kids are not going to be able to turn 18 or in between that and go to college and come out of it and be like, okay, I'm buying a nice starter home. That's not going to be obtainable for them at this current rate.
And so the thing here is we're talking about, going back 60, 80 years and the build up to it. But the reality is there wasn't a problem 10 or 15 years ago. Not a major problem. In the Phoenix, which is the fourth largest metropolitan area in the country, right? You could buy a nice home for 120,000 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I think the problem really is the fact that Green Street, Vanguard, all of these massive corporations started buying up all the homes, and they currently own like 30% of the houses in America or something insane like that. And that's when prices started going through the roof. And that's when we started getting this agenda pushed on us that we're supposed to hate the people who bought a house that went up in value, and it's their fault that they're not selling it and that they're old. I think the real problem is the fact that we're allowing massive corporations to own all of the inventory and artificially inflate prices.
When we don't have congressional delegates that are going to actually help the people, like people that are disinterested, because I don't know if it's just their generation. I mean, there are millennials in Congress. They're much fewer and far between. There's some Gen Xers. More significantly, there's a ton of boomers even still in Congress, but they're the ones that make the laws. I mean, that's the legislative branch. They make the laws. And until they do that, you can already tell they don't really care about you. They don't care about anything. Get the text from them about this time of year, coming up midterms, saying, hey, come vote for me, donate to my whatever campaign. But they don't really represent us. I mean, it's flagrantly clear, because if they did, BlackRock would have like some sort of a law against them from owning a certain number of homes.
Yep. 100%. And that's where, to me, every time I start to see hate pushed in society, I have to look at where's the real money behind this, that they're going to push this agenda of hate out there. And then I always remember it all goes back to the enemy, the devil. He is the one who creates all of this.
Partly what we need to remember too is the devil obviously wants the division, but at the same time, an ungodly person is going to be a person that can't look introspectively and then make the changes and adjust. And so that's like I definitely see with the boomers. I see that in other generations too, but like prevailingly, if you had to speak generationally speaking, the issue of not having sympathy and understanding people from other backgrounds, whether it's economic, socio-political, ethnic backgrounds, is the boomers. They are so unable to see through other lenses. It's astounding. So there's a quote here. This is just about the boomers. It says, they are the most insecure generation. They lack the drive, purpose, and knowing who, capital who, meaning God, who their source is. And that was actually from someone really close to me that doesn't want to mention this, but a friend of mine was talking with me about boomers, and this was their response. And I see that, because I think if you know who your source is, there's none of this need for materialism and then like literally demonically going into debt to show off. I mean, that is literally pride up the wazoo. That is just so proud. You're killing yourself financially. You're killing whatever you might leave behind to your future, your posterity in the stoking of your ego. And that's, to me, that's just absolutely demonic. Not that I haven't done things out of ego myself, by any means in my past, especially before being born again. But anytime you need to do something to stoke your ego and you're always right and you can't concede others' viewpoints, I mean, it's just evil. It's not right.
I think it's also, Trevor, a cultural thing. I think just as Americans, we view things as like, and I think I was trying to make that point earlier, that my kids won't be able to buy a house. And we view that as a negative. If you turn 18 and you can't go provide on your own, it's like you're not really succeeding as an 18-year-old in America. Like, you need to be financially stable enough to go buy your own home. And like, I do think, I'm hoping that by the time that this rolls around and my kids are 18, they feel comfortable staying at home in a way that they're still going to go out and be productive and carry out their lives and not care what society thinks about them. Because I mean, I delivered pizzas when I started back in the day, and I'd go to people's houses of different nationalities, and like there would be an Arabic home, there would be like a whole family in a trailer, but they weren't unhappy. They were getting ready dinner on a rug together, and like they all were like roughhousing, have a good time, laughing. And you knock on the door, and they'd sit, put the pizza in the middle of them, start eating, and they pay for the pizza. I get out of there. But that would happen in Mexican homes too, where you'd have multi-generational people there. The grandmas are there, the grandkids are there. They're all hanging out. And like, I do think we're missing the point sometimes with, I'm not saying the boomers are the cause, but they definitely were the generation that was able to go do these things that they're describing. We need to go do to feel successful. And I think that's the trap.
Well,
I think, oh, go ahead.
They want to lend on student loans. They want to be able to lend on other mortgages. So they want people to go, barely afford apartment and housing. And so they push this. Like, when you're 18, you need to be independent. You need to get out of the house. Which is ironic, because if you go through the public school system, you don't even know how to write a check or balance your finances at all. You don't even know what anything is about the real world and how it works. You just might know the Pythagorean theorem, and that's about it. And so it's the psyop. That's the same with just why they wanted both men and women to work, so they can have more taxes coming in from two workers. Here, it's so that they can go into debt and the bankers can take fat stacks, because people have this cultural need to stand out, be individualistic, and be out on their own and be independent at 18.
Yeah, I agree completely with, the boomers' mentality of this and that. And I just think that's what the messaging was as they were being brought up in the world, similar to how the messaging changed to a different place. And I will always go back to the top. Like, we have all heard of this 2030 agenda, right? You will own nothing and you will be happy, right? And so right around that same time is where all the hate for the boomers came in, because we have to take the hate away from the people who are at the top that are causing all of the problems. So let's go ahead and push it onto social media and get them hating each other. Let's make the millennials hate the boomers hate the Gen Xers. Let's get them hating each other so that no one can look at where the real problem is coming from. Like, I remember talking to a friend about this probably 15 years ago, where I was just like, I'm reading a lot about, advancements in robotics and where this is all headed. And at the time I was like, dude, just wait. Because if robots are really on their way, they're going to replace people at work. And we're going to start seeing our government shift all of the messaging to us. Because if they know jobs will be replaced, they have to start coming up with a plan on how to make people like it. And so, or just how to make them not look at where the problem's really coming from. And look at where we're at right now, right? We're very close to this actually happening. And we see the behind the scenes, this whole 2030 messaging where, yeah, universal income's a great thing. Yeah, tiny homes. We all like living in these small places. We all like not owning anything. We like sharing a car. We like having a bird scooter that we can hop on at any time. We like all of this stuff that doesn't give us any independence. And so, I don't know. To me, it always goes back to the people at the top, the people with all the money.
Yeah, I agree. And so, going back to the boomer discussion here, like, identity issues, what we see, like, culturally speaking, is it seems like they really put their kids out as their source. of accomplishments. Like their kid is the actual trophy that they would have. And I just want to like put that out there and get a discussion going regarding this. But this is partly some of the stuff that I've seen when you have a phone call with like my parents or my wife's parents. Like there's just not really like a lot going on in their personal life. Like they're not doing things that they should be doing. Like they should be traveling. If they had such a good killer economy, but they hadn't blown it all on the consumerism, they should have so much money tucked away and passive income built. They could be traveling and doing fun things in their retirement and coming to see their grandkids. But instead, like one of those videos said, why don't you come to me? Like the grandparent is saying, why don't you guys come to us, the grandparents? Which is just the most asinine comment to me as a person with like, you know, my wife's pregnant. We have a 2-year-old, we have a 7-year-old, and a 10-year-old. Do you think I really want to go and stand in line at the airport and queue up and go through multiple flights and potential delays and layovers to go see the grandparents who, you know, and also like when we go to visit, their house isn't like baby proof. So it's just laborious for me to like stay on top of my kids and keep them from breaking all the glass objects that are within reach on the coffee table. It's like there's just no thought to the burden, and like just when we go to do something, the burden is still on us parents. So like we prefer like, and we just tell them like straight up, like if you guys want to see the grandkids, look, first of all, you've lived here in the same town we lived, and then you moved halfway across the country. So, you know, pardon us for not jumping at the opportunity to come spend thousands of dollars to travel, to work extra hard to watch our kids in your home so that you can just see them here and there for a little bit. I'm being very, very open about our personal life and whatnot, but these are some frustrating things that we've seen. But to my in-laws' credit, they've actually come our way like 2 times a year, which is pretty awesome. And then we try to put them up and do things for them, like take care of all the meals and all that kind of stuff and entertain them. Because it's super convenient to have them here. We have our own beds. We have, which is hard with little kids, you know, they have their little routine. So if you're visiting at someone else's house, it's all new. So the bedtime routine just goes out the window. Brushing teeth, that's just not going to happen. I mean, it does, but it's all just a chore, you know, and we're exhausted and we're still trying to run our businesses from our phones and computers while we're away from them physically. So it is a big chore, and to my in-laws' credit, they do understand that. Although they still ask, like, "Do you guys want to come see us?" We're like, "Nah," not trying to be like rude or anything. And I think they get it. To their credit, they get it. But it's just something that is rare, though. I don't. When I talk to all my friends that are like Gen X, millennials, and even some Gen Zers, and they talk about like seeing their parents, it is a lot of them have to go out of their way to have a relationship with their, you know, older generations. And it's a little frustrating. We're working harder than other generations because the economy is so much crappier now than it's been. So we're trying to afford half the lifestyle, it feels like, that maybe earlier generations have had when they were our ages. And it's really frustrating. And so I understand why there's this like hate for boomers. But also, you got to understand, like Josh just said, like it's just part of the game. Whether the boomers aren't going to relinquish the power, whether they're going to not even acknowledge that they had the system in a better spot than where we have it, that doesn't necessarily matter. Eventually, they will get older. Eventually, another generation is going to, you know, come in, and they're going to have, and things will be different, whether for worse or better. At the end of the day, though, it's all just a scheme of the enemy to divide us. But again, just talking about this culturally, I just wanted to get your guys' opinions about that. Boomers kind of wanting maybe things to happen on their terms, and or also just, do you guys think that they put you up as like their accolades and trophies in their lives?
You want me to start, Josh, or you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, go for it.
I think that I do see a lot of that happening with the generation titled boomers, where they do put their kids as their trophies. And I find it ironic that like boomers is from like 46 to 64. That's a big gap. And I do believe that the later generation is probably where our parents came from. Might be a little bit different. I do see the trophy project.
Really quick, Steve. Sorry. Before you go into that, the boomers started they were born beginning in 1946, right? So they're up to 80 years old.
Right.
Okay, so you just said 46 to 64.
No, I'm taking 1946 to 1964.
Oh, okay. My bad. I'm sorry for cutting you off. I was confused on what you were saying there.
I should have elaborated that. I'm sorry. But I do think it's interesting because I do think our parents raised us and probably in that later generation. But the trophy parents that you're describing, Trevor, for me, that's interesting is because the kids that were being raised right before we became parents, it's the iPad generation and the participation trophy generation. And so I think that's kind of comes full circle as we're talking about this because I think that's the epitome of what we don't want our kids to be is stuck on screens all day long and getting a participation trophy. Like we want our kids to know what it's like to earn things. Where the generation 10 years prior to us to 5 years, whatever it was when they were raising their kids, we saw this participation trophy and we were like, what is this? Every kid gets a trophy? Like, what are they really learning from this? So it's almost like a direct reflection of what you just described. Like this people who looked at their kids to be their pride and joy, almost like a false idol in a sense. Like my kids are who I am. Look what I did. This generation that felt that pressure and that stress of being that for their parents in return is like, here's an iPad, here's a trophy. I want to be your best friend.
Yeah, it's like every single generation sees what they really disliked about the generation before, and then they overcompensate trying to do the opposite. So like the boomers, they were raised by adults who went through the Great Depression. So they were raised by parents who were saving every single penny. They were reusing bath water for the kids taking baths. And so to give it a little, like, I guess, perspective on where their heads were at, they, in their mind, and along with what's being pushed onto them with the messaging, they wanted to give their kids things. They wanted to be extravagant because they didn't have anything as little children. They had the penny pinching. And so they wanted to be able to go out and, I'm buying my kid a car when he turns 16. I'm giving him the baseball bat he wants, the baseball glove, like everything he wants. I want to be able to provide that. But they worked so much that the children were actually abandoned. The kids were raising themselves. And that was, starting with like older siblings of ours down into our age group almost. We were raising ourselves because the parents just worked so much because you had to provide. And so then it shifted to, like you said, like helicopter parenting, give them a trophy for everything they do, but also like, I'm burnt out, so here's your iPad, leave me alone. And, like it's just a constant cycle, but then directed by our messaging too.
I got a story to share about that, but seeing it full come circle from that generation. And then Trevor, I want to hear what you have to say. I'll make my story quick. I remember seeing the shift in all this because there was a kid that I hired at the restaurant I worked at, and he literally didn't want to do anything when he was at work, and he only lasted about 3 days. And I kept on trying to like guide him and showing him how to do things, and I wouldn't even leave him with an employee to train. I would take him hands on because I hired him. And on day 3, I just was like, pulled him aside. I'm like, hey, bud, we're gonna go ahead and just let you go. Like you didn't pass like the test to kind of see if you could work here. And he looked at me and goes, what are you talking about? And I'm like, we're going to let you go. Like you're fired. I didn't want to say it that way, but he's like, you can't fire me. I'm like, you just got fired. And he's like, no, this is my job. I just got it. You can't take it from me. And I was like, but I started seeing my employees having that sense of entitlement. And there was a sense of when I started telling them to do things, they would start talking amongst each other like, he doesn't get it, does he? Like, they're not going to be told what to do as a generation. And I was like, there's something shifting here. And it all had to do with the kids getting off Facebook and going to Instagram and then going to Snapchat. And they needed to be their own space, but it just went crazy. So what were you going to say, Trevor? Sorry?
I was just going to say, Josh hit it on the head when he was talking about like how we had these generational digressions and overreactions. So yeah, you had latchkey kids turn into helicopter parents, essentially. So I'm just after a latchkey kid, but there's people that are like 5 to 6, 7 years older than me, and they had kids that I might have taught at the school, and they were definitely the latchkey kids, and then turned into like they're not even helicopter parents anymore; they're bulldozer parents. So it's like if you get in the way, they plow through you instead of just being a helicopter neutrally, like overwatching their children. They'll actually like plow the road for them. They're the kind that are like starting to show up right now when their kids are just turning 18. They'll go with them. It's like children 18, young people 18 to 20 There was this interview done out of a pool of like 1,100 people, and 30% of them showed up to their first job interview with one of their parents. Can you imagine?
Wow.
Steven works at runs a pizza place, and if I'd showed up there with like a parent to help me get the job, like it is pathetic sounding, but it's interesting. Like the dichotomy that we've seen come full circle. And then this is where you say as a boomer, like, well, that's just a shame. Like, what's wrong with these parents? These people are now like their grandkids' age, possibly. What's wrong with those parents? And so I get it. Like, I get the hate there. Like, there's some weird things going on with like Gen Z and entitlement issues. But I think partly too, it's a response of theirs thinking the system has been rigged against them, and they're not necessarily wrong. It's just the attitude of entitlement itself is just absolutely demonic. Whether you're an older person and you think I'm entitled to this because I, paid my dues and my kids don't deserve anything from me. I earned all this. That's entitlement. It's demonic. Okay. There's scriptures that talk about that. But likewise, if the system's rigged against you, it's entitlement and demonic to think, well, I'm not even going to try. And you're just going to be a slothful and lazy servant. There's also scriptures that talk about that too. So we got to stop looking at things and just responding in the way that like we feel in our heart, because the heart is deceitful and it's, it can be deceived and lead you away. You need to weigh things against the word of God at the end of the day and behave and act as if God is always watching, because he is. So how can I be less entitled as a boomer versus how can I be less entitled as an up and coming Gen Zer or somewhere in between? That's kind of what the whole point of this discussion was to be, is these are all reciprocating attitudes, if you will, from each generation towards other generations and vice versa. But keeping this on boomer specific, there's this thing I've seen personally with like lack of respect. There's this my way or the highway. There's also like when we would have my kids go to like my mom's house, it was kind of like what happens at grandma's stays at grandma's, and she'd frequently like tell the kids like don't tell dad we forgot to brush our teeth, or don't tell him we ate junk food or something. It's a little upsetting that like you would try to tell your kids to like keep secrets, if that makes sense. I don't know how you guys feel about that personally, but to me that was kind of like frustrating and showed a lack of respect to me as a parent.
No, I totally understand. It's I don't know if that's you think that's definitely like a boomer versus like any other grandparent, or do you like, because I think that sounds like it could be like a person to person scenario. I know that, I probably run into those things too with grandparents though, where they probably say, hey, don't say anything, but if I'm being fair, like there's sometimes when I have my kids by myself where I take one of my kids out to get ice cream and I'm like, hey, don't tell mom and don't tell your sibling, but I'm gonna get you something real quick and keep that between me and you.
Well, partly though too, like if I didn't lay this out first, like there's been like groundwork established with our relationship with them, and like, hey, we don't want these things because we've already paid $1,000, and we've also asked like we do need to be brushing teeth because we're trying to avoid future dental problems. So this is all like something I didn't preface with that. So it's flagrantly like going against like the couple like minor requests that we asked. That's not, we gave a laundry list before we drop them off to be watched. It was just those two things literally. Like, we don't care too much about the diet. Just don't do hard candies, because Leland has like, my oldest has like silver metal fillings and stuff. And then of course, looking at getting more dental work done. And so we're trying to avoid it, from being like another big financial burden, which meant let's brush and floss. So it was just frustrating for sure. And then when we approach it, it's like narratives seem to get flipped and defensiveness kicks in. And it's something I see a lot with boomers. And I think it's because they have that, like, we've proven, like, we've paid our dues. We don't have younger people. Maybe it's the diaper syndrome thing. Like, I raised you in diapers. I'll never see you as an equal adult raising your own kids. You're always kind of like less experienced and underneath me.
I do feel that a lot. I do feel that from that generation where, as a 45-year-old, I'll go hang out with that generation and you're still considered the baby of the group. And I'm like, I got a gray beard and I'm 45 years old, bro. You got to chill out a little bit. But I do think, as you're explaining this to me, I do think part of the problem when you're saying this is the boomer generation in total, from 1946 to 1964 and going forward, there's a lot of things that changed in our world especially like our generation, which I think you're considered a millennial. I'm considered just on the last year of Gen Z. But there was the internet that came out and all these different social media apps, all these different ways of doing things and technology that like we literally have to keep adapting in a way that like we we can't, we'll get too far left behind if we don't participate in technology. That I do see this older generation like I'll try and recommend to that generation, hey, you should just get on YouTube and watch some stuff or etc. And it can be any technology. And they're like, can you show me how to do that? And I'm like, yeah, I can show you, but it's really easy. I can probably talk you through it. And they literally like, and I'll show them how to do it. And then next thing you know, I get a call the next week. Hey, I don't know how to work that again. And you're like, okay, like you're patient, of course. But I do think there's certain parts of when you like let go of things and like you just decide that it's life is the way it is. And I think they get stuck in their ways a little bit. And I don't think we've had that luxury yet.
Well, partly too, it's because of how they grew up. They grew up in the cushier era, so they didn't have to be adaptable and malleable. They were going to have the same job till they retired. They could buy one house on one income and call it a day. Like whereas us, yeah, we grew up with technology and we grew up with companies buying out other companies and layoffs and the economy. And when you look at like just the housing market crash of 2008 versus the Great Depression of 1929, they pale in comparison. The 2008 housing market crash saw like 3 or 4 times the loss in like private financial, whether it was in real estate property or just like dollars in the bank. It was like 4 times more catastrophic than the 1929 Great Depression. And so you look at that and you're just like, bro, I don't even want to hear about the boomers parents growing up in the Great Depression. Like, I don't even want to hear about that. Okay. That was me like in college at the time. I don't know. You guys are maybe just coming out of college, just getting married, maybe. I'm not sure, but we were all just getting started, and that happened, and somehow that actually wasn't like as long. I don't feel maybe 3 years. The Great Depression took a little longer to shake off in from 1929 to like 35, I want to guess, like 6 years, but around like 2011 or 12, a few years less, it was already kind of shook off somehow. So, which is nice.
To me, the what really caused the biggest problem is with the whole mentality of the boomers and the whole we work and we provide and we buy things, whatever, is they were the generation that stopped taking their family to church. They were the generation that started to, I'm tired. I don't need to wake up on Sunday and go to church. And that was where the biggest shift happened, is God started being pulled away from our society. And to me, that's my biggest blame to that generation, outside of the way that maybe they act or the entitlement or any of that, the rigidness. Well, they lost God, and then they didn't give God to the next generation. And that's, going into the Bible quote that I read about, generational curses. It's almost like they began a generational curse, which when we get into that topic a little bit, we'll discuss how things changed with Jesus coming, but generational curses can still happen if we're not inviting Jesus into our lives.
Absolutely. And I think that's kind of like the same thing. So like you talked about like latchkey kids becoming helicopter parents is the same thing. That's a curse, because you're just dooming your children to like a permanent attachment and need to have you around, because they don't know how to do anything independently. They don't know how to think creatively. They don't know how to go even get a job or anything like to function in society, because you've just done it for them. And that is an epidemic too. And again, it all stems back from responses. So not even to blame boomers, like we've talked about. It's not even to blame like those that went through the Great Depression, the greatest generation, the silent generation that raised boomers. It's not even to blame them, because they're all just having these normative responses. It's just godlessness in general, in ways and in different shapes and in different forms. Something I was going to add too is this just being not malleable and not adaptable, like we've talked about. One thing I've seen when I've confronted boomers about something, or like what we'd like to see is like whether we were talking to my parents or my wife's parents about like helping us as their, in their role as grandparents or anything. I always got this response, especially from like my side of the family, was basically like, this is like the stuff I received, or this is how I was helped with, raising you guys. So this is what I'm going to give. There's this inability to kind of like do something differently just because it's different. So like if I ask my parents or whoever as a boomer, like, this is, you're the grandparent, you're coming in, like, this is what I'd like to see, or whatever. It's like, well, no, because that's not what I got. We didn't get you guys babysat either, so we're not going to offer that to you. And it's really frustrating, I'll say, because why would you? What's your purpose of life then in retirement? Like, really, what should it be? Like, let's answer that question as a group. I'm going to open it up and look at it biblically. Let's say we're coming into grandparenthood. Let's say we're all pushing late 50s, 60s right now, this moment. What do you do as an up and coming grandpa? What should that look like? How would you support your kids at that point? I'll just throw it out there.
That's a lot to unpackage, man. I honestly, I'm hoping that, like, I don't put my kids out as trophies at all, but the job I take most seriously in my life is being a father. And I hope that I raise my kids in a way that they're going to want us to be part of their lives. And just the way that my life's changed since I've been following Jesus closer is like, I used to, and I've shared this maybe, and maybe you didn't hear it, Trevor, like, I was like getting crypto rich for a little bit there, and I was riding high. I had a bunch of money, and just kind of started thinking I had control over things. And I was still going to church, but I was definitely not following Jesus the way I should have. And since then, I've humbled myself and put myself in front of God and said, I need to change. I want my kids to follow my footsteps as just because I'm following God. That's it. And I hope that those lessons that I'm showing them right now will pay dividends to when they have kids, that they will get their kids involved with church at an early age, and they'll understand how important our family is to honor God together. That would be my short answer.
Yeah, I would agree with Steve on that completely. I saw a different example. My mom, she's no longer with us, but she was a boomer, but she never liked her generation. So she was very different, and she was always walking with God for the most part. But she would have dropped and done anything for her grandkids. I watched it with my brother and my sister's kids. There was nothing my mom wanted more than to be able to spend time with the grandkids and babysit. Like, if my sister moved, my mom moved to wherever she was going so that she could be there around her grandkids. And so that was the example I always saw. I'd never, I wasn't fortunate enough to have her with us while I've had children, but I know how she would have been. So I saw a different example. But now on the other side of it, I see from my in-laws exactly what you're talking about. They'll help, but if it's convenient, or okay, yeah, sure, I'll come watch the kids, but I actually need some money to buy new tires for my car. Or it's I don't know. I see that mentality, but back to the original question, I don't want to be anything like that when I'm a grandfather. I look forward to that day of being able to see my kids raising kids, and I just hope when that time comes that I set a good enough example, that I was a good enough father, that they don't go out and do it completely different than me. To not repeat that generational thing like we were talking about, where the iniquity of the parents falls onto the children, and I hope that I do a good enough job that I don't put them into that pattern.
I like your guys' responses. I'm going to pose some questions, but these are basically the way that I would almost make it as a statement of how I would also try to be answering my own question, what I pose to you. So the first one is, if you give a quote gift to your children, but then lord it over them or that person, or bring it up in some way? Was it really truly a gift? And like, to me, like, so, okay, going into, like, let's pretend I'm like 25, 30 years older. My kids are out of the house. Maybe some have already had children of their own. If I need to do anything to help them and give a gift, maybe even like a bit of their inheritance early, because they could definitely use it in their 20s and 30s more so than when they're in their 40s, 50s, 60s, when I actually go croak. If they need help with like a down payment on a house, ideally, I'd like to imagine like I'm not only financially capable, but also that I've raised them enough to like be responsible with it. Because what I've been seeing is lots of messages from boomers on Instagram regarding a post by Pastor Mark Driscoll, where he talks about consider giving an inheritance to your children a little early instead of just when you pass, because they need it when they're sooner. And I like that idea to a degree. But then some of the boomers chime in there. It's like, well, what about myself? And again, they are literally called the me generation. So like we can go ahead and quantify, like, they've maybe in a non-accusatorily way, in a generic way, say that they've made themselves their own God. And now we're all doing the same in younger generations, like, speaking out of like generalities, but giving a gift without strings attached is something definitely really hard in my experience with boomers that I've not really seen them be able to do. Another thing is, do your kids need that financial help? Like I had mentioned, like, when do you think you needed it, as when you were growing up, like 20s and 30s, or like now in our 40s? And to me, like, there was a time we had to borrow money from my wife's grandma to get a down payment for a house. But then, we paid it back as quick as we could. The house came up on the market. It was a really good deal. And so it wasn't even a gift per se. It was just a quick loan, which is still nice. He didn't want any interest or anything. So it was nice to just be able to have some money instantly and then just be able to pay it back over a later period of time so we could take advantage of a really good house hitting the market. So closing this may be part of the discussion so that we can move on. I do have tons more to share, but that's totally fine. I think we've hit some good stuff here. What I see myself doing is, first, I don't ever want to criticize my kids ever when they've turned 18 or somewhere around that threshold. It doesn't have to be like right on day one of 18, but somewhere around there. I want to stop giving all advice and criticisms unsolicited. Now, that's the key word. I think a lot of times young people, it's good for them to go through experiences on their own. It's good for them to be humble to ask an opinion instead of just make a decision and learn from it. Because I personally, I feel like my boomer parents and other boomers that I've met, even just in silly little things like showing them our house redecorated on a video chat. My in-laws were like, oh yeah, it looks cute. Like, my wife redecorated our bedroom recently, and so she was FaceTiming them. But then there was like just backhanded type compliments and criticisms that came in from it. And definitely it was like frustrating, but at the same time, it's like, I almost don't know that she even realized that she did that. Does that make sense? I don't know if this read with you too, but I just want to be real careful, like, what I say when I get to that place, to not unknowingly kind of push or offend my kids and the grandkids from just maybe silly comments that I make. I think there's a lot of offhanded, not mean intended type comments, but they are kind of mean, and they are kind of comparative, like competition. And it's really frustrating, like, having those just thrown in and like every discussion I have with boomers, it feels like.
Ironically, I love you, Mom. If you watch this episode, she came over to my house the other day, and I have two garages, and one of them is broken, and you can tell it's broken if you walk around where my car's at. And she's just like, I cannot stand seeing your garage door broken. I'm going to pay for you to get that fixed. And I'm like, it's not bothering me in the least. You know what I mean? And but she just was, what you said kind of resonates with me. It didn't bother me. It didn't stick with me all day. But I just remember thinking to myself, like, I'll pay to get my garage fixed when I'm ready, but it's not a priority to me. I have like other things that I want to do, or whatever it is. But that makes sense to me. I do think that there's a lot of generational differences that, even when we talk about like the silent generation, I remember the grandparents that I had from them, either they were really loving and overly like just special, like Mr. Rogers types, or they were mean as all can be. Like, they were some of the meanest people I've ever been around. And so, it just depends. You're a product of your society. And I think that we're going through that right now too. So.
for sure. Well, that was about all I had. I think some of this definitely stems into generational curses. If one of you two wants to kind of move us in that direction.
I was gonna get us going there. I kind of think the way that it all works though is like I just described as some of the generations being mean or whatever. I do think the devil takes every opportunity to learn from your family about these generational curses. And like say the trick that the devil played on boomers was to give them extra life through medical procedures to extend their life. So they start thinking, I have extra time to live. I could live 20 to 40 years longer than people used to live. So money became this huge idol to them. And the devil started using money in their eyes. And I think it started affecting us as teenagers when we started watching movies in the 80s and it was glorified to have riches and all these things. And riches provide you people who find you romantically attractive. And I just keep seeing the sin cycle completed in a way that I'm seeing now that the devil's ultimate plan, he got us on cell phones. And so we're seeing these generational curses where he got a cell phone in our hands and basically he can attack us from all angles now. It's not just one generational curse. It's anything you can think of. He will find from your family past to tempt you with, whether it's lust, money. You pick your poison and what sin you want. And he's like, I got you. I got what you want. Here's your prize. Josh, do you have a Bible verse that you wanted to go over with the generational curses?
I do. So if you remember the verse I used going into the boomer part of it about the generational curses, and it's Old Testament, but the second one I want to give is a New Testament, and there's many that can relate, but Romans 8 verses 1 and 2. Therefore, there is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus, because through Christ Jesus, the law of the Spirit who gives life has set you free from the law of sin and death. And so obviously that's talking about free of sin and death, but it's freedom from the generational curses. Through our belief in Christ, through our faith in him, we are forgiven of everything. And we are no longer held to what we might have been set up with by our parents or our grandparents. We are free from it when we believe in Christ.
Well, we already solved the problem, so we can move on to the next topic.
That's it. The end.
I'll show the video either way, but now that you guys know the answer, please stay for the rest of what we talk about.
Well, I was just gonna say, if you just analyze things from generations and you just respond without using like God and the Spirit and getting born again and those things, you're just gonna create a counter response, which is just another generational curse. So like latchkey kids turning into helicopter parents is an example. It's like boomers to latchkey kids to helicopter parents. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't be paying attention to your kid and like helicoptering to like a much less degree is bad. Like being aware of your kids is great. Showing up to the PTA, teacher conference stuff, showing up to their sports is good. Totally cool. But just being overly involved to the point where they don't have like freedom and independence themselves, freedom to think, freedom to like learn and grow and speak for themselves and maybe difficult circumstances, you're just creating a curse. Again, there's that balance and the Spirit and God and his word are what you need to have as a guiding tool to know, like, not only is it broken and cured, but then how to move forward as a parent and later as a grandparent.
There's a video by David Hernandez. I took a really small chunk of it just to kind of, he talks about this stuff. And then I want to get into it with you guys about what he defines as that. And then Josh kind of gave us the answer, like Jesus came to break it all. But for people who don't know anything about it, and they haven't given their life to Jesus, let's talk about the things that we've seen in our lives ourselves, or let's talk about things we've seen from other people.
Everything you can to be free. In your generations, there may be problems with alcoholism, drug addiction, adultery, mental illness, depression, and so forth. You've prayed the curse-breaking prayers. You've done the ancestral research. You've gone from deliverance session to deliverance session. Maybe you've even named a demon or two. But here you are, still struggling and wondering how to be free. Wondering, what am I doing wrong? Results that the grandparents did. My main point here is not that demons don't attack us generationally. They do. The main point here is that you are not powerless. You are not at the mercy of solving some riddle. You are not at the mercy of your grandparents' decisions. I can't tell you how many times I've heard a Christian say, I've just been praying that God would break it. I know one day he's going to break that generational curse over my family. I say, what are you talking about one day? Do you not believe in the power of the Holy Ghost? Well, then why is my uncle suffering with alcoholism? Because of the decisions that they make. And we'll show that to you here. So here are 3 thoughts around the experience of curses that people may experience. How do you explain the experience of curses that come on people? Well, let's do number 1 first. Number 1, we're going to look at repeat generational trouble. And then we're going to look at repeat bad and oppressive feelings. And then we're going to look at repeat bad situations, okay? So repeat generational trouble. That's what I'm going to explain first. Alcoholism, generation to generation. Drug addiction, generation to generation. Adultery, generation to generation. And then we're going to look at repeat bad and oppressive feelings. That is, you have like this cloud, this weight on you, and every generation has that, and you have that, and it's just like this fog in the spirit that you can't quite see through. That is a demonic attack. We're going to look at that in a moment. And then we're going to look at repeat bad situations where you feel like you can't catch a break. The marriage failed, the business failed, the car failed, nothing seems to go right ever. And that's just the way it's been in your family for years. So let's take a look at each one of these individually.
That's what we're going to do, boys. We're going to look at each one of these individually. I have them written down so you don't have to remember it. But starting off, I love David Hernandez. For anyone who doesn't watch him online, he's a great pastor. He's really worth checking into all kinds of different problems you may face. He talks about how to speak in tongues and all these different things. Really great stuff. Starting with his first one up on the docket was repeat generational trouble. I see this a lot with people that we were just discussing with the boomers and whatnot. What do you guys think? Is there something that you see that highlighted in generational curses between that generation and carried on with us?
I did. When I left the Mormon church, my mom and so I'd never had a drop of alcohol, coffee, or green tea like you're supposed to in the Mormon church. So as I left, and then I'm looking at the Bible, and I'm like, well, Jesus turned water into wine. So I thought, well, I'll try it. So as we would spend time with my mom after I was born again, there would be occasions they'd come up for the 4th of July or big events, and I might have a drink, a beer, a glass of wine, something simple, whatever. And watching her behavior towards us, just living in this absolute fear for me, I'm falling into the generational curse of our family alcoholism stuff. Our grandpa, he was an alcoholic apparently, and so there's this fear that she would literally try to instill in me to abstain or whatever. And to me, it's not about the alcohol, it's about giving into the power and giving into the fear. And this goes into play into later when we talk about armor of God. There's all these scriptures that talk about fear not. Jesus even himself telling people to don't fear. And then we need to understand who we are. So that doesn't mean I can go do frivolous things with alcohol by any means. There's a responsibility thing, just like with anything that's, as long as it's not ungodly. But it's sad to see that we put so much on these generational curses. We give them so much power. We talk about them, and that empowers them too. And we reinforce them in our family discussions too. And I think that's something that we all need to stop doing as born again believers. Yeah, the devil exists, and yeah, he's got these things, these weapons, but really he only has one weapon, and that's deception. The deception is to get us into fear. And then in that fear, then we start losing our faith, and it becomes unbelief. And then we stop, being able to resist the devil because we think he's bigger than he really is. We're just empowering him.
Definitely. I didn't bring it up during the boomer segment, but some of it, I wonder, how much does it go back onto, World War I, World War II, and Vietnam War? And those generations went through, horrific atrocities with these wars. And, I could only imagine how many evil spirits are attached to, what they're involved in, especially then going into the Vietnam War. There was a lot of drug use. There was a lot of addiction taking place during the war. And that's inviting these spirits in, which I think then can be passed generationally. And when people aren't following God and accepting God into their life, less children are being baptized, less people are going to church. And so we're letting those spirits control us. And I watched it with my dad. He was an alcoholic. My dad fought in Vietnam. My grandpa fought in World War II, I believe. He was an alcoholic. And so as a kid seeing this, I made a choice as a kid. I said, I will never be an alcoholic. I know that follows you, and I know that runs in your family, and I will never become an alcoholic. And so that was always in my mind growing up. And so, yeah, I drank when we weren't walking with God. I would abuse alcohol on occasions. I would go way over the top with it, but it was always in my mind that I'm not drinking 2 days in a row. I'm not drinking, if I drink one day, I can't drink again for a week or 2 weeks because I'm never going to be an alcoholic. And so I feel like I broke that generational curse. And I don't know if that was the Holy Spirit inside of me always guiding me that way. But either way, I think a lot of it can be controlled by our mind, like on what we choose to believe. We can choose to believe that I'm going to be an alcoholic because my dad was an alcoholic. Or I can choose to say, I refuse to be an alcoholic because I saw that my dad was an alcoholic.
I honestly, I'm obviously not going to bring up names, but I had a guy that I used to hang out with that, super great guy, Christian. He, from a distance, he seems like a really great father. Because he had 2 older kids and he had a younger kid. And as we started to raise kids around each other in social circles, his kid was causing a lot of problems and like really like obscene things happening. I'm not going to get into details, but I started to watch the way he'd parent afterwards, and he would go over and scream at him to stop. And he'd always coach him the right thing to do and say. But then him as a person, as I started watching him parent, I started watching his kids mimic what he does, not what he says. And I started going like, oh my gosh, more like they say, more is caught than taught. And I'm like, if you don't walk it out, and you can start to say like, well, my dad was an alcoholic, now I'm an alcoholic. Your dad can tell you left and right, don't drink, don't do that. But the minute they get into situations where their life turns to a point where alcohol is a good solution to solve your problems, they're going to go, what do I do to get through this? They're going to look back to what you did. Mm-hmm. And so you can say, oh, it's not my fault. I got it from my dad. And I think like even just we begin to say like Jesus cures it all. It's always going to be the answer. No matter what we talk about, we get through these things. But I do think accountability as a parent, and to start realizing like you need to be an example. Read your Bible. Like there's things in the Bible teach you about what you need to do to be a good parent. And Jesus is a great example of that. Do you guys have anything else you guys want to add about repeat generational trouble?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a scripture, Proverbs 23:7. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. And I think that goes like with Josh and talking about his decision, whether guided by the Spirit or not, or just also maybe in tandem with his own like strong consciousness and decision making to not become something. You can do that, and you can do that willfully without the Spirit. And I'm not saying Josh did that, but there's all kinds of like, special stories of people that have overcome circumstances and they just made decisions, and that's a part of it. But it's really that identity thing. So like if you're gonna just identify, I'm not an alcoholic, I can do this to whatever degree, but I'm not gonna let myself become an alcoholic, then absolutely. And that's just backed by the Bible. And you make these decisions, whether it's regarding how you're going to act as a grandparent when we become one, like we were discussing earlier, how you're going to deal with substances or other generational curses. They're not even just substances. I think generational curses can be like thinking patterns, behavior patterns, from big and little things too, not like, attitudes and mentalities of small things to big things, causing major interpersonal things, or just causing small little strifes in your family. Those all could be considered generational curses. So if we're working and fixing and purging what's in our hearts, and we start thinking the correct things, the godly things, and we understand who we are in him, and that we actually absolutely have the power to break every big and small generational curse. And as we start really truly understanding that we it's possible, and that we can, and that he's already done that essentially, and that power resides within us, then there's really no reason to have generational curses anymore if we could just get everybody born again.
It's just such a simple task. If we just had everyone born again.
It's got to get out there. Start knocking doors.
And the podcast, you have the solution for everything.
It always is.
So the next topic he brought up was repeat bad and oppressive feelings. I think this is going to be an interesting topic for us to bring up. Josh, you mentioned that there's a lot of things that happen in your life. Trevor, we've mentioned our family had some history that has a lot of bad things. So these topics are pretty hit home for some of us harder than others. I do think there is it kind of goes with what I just said about you're going to learn more by what people share as an example for you than it will be if you have to walk away from these generational curses. And you can't call them a curse anymore because your kids will learn what you're saying. Because my daughter, if you watch this podcast long enough, I started talking about end times, and my daughter eventually one day came to me. She's like, "Dad, am I going to be able to go to heaven?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, I've heard a lot of what you talk about, and you told me there's like an age that God's going to know whether I was able to accept him or not. And I was like, I felt so guilty. And I'm like, you don't have to worry about anything. Like literally, like God's going to be there for you. Don't worry about it. But she was worried. And I just don't, have you guys seen this with other people? Do you guys see this with like something that you've experienced?
I've seen it with myself. And so how I gave the example of choosing not to become an alcoholic and breaking that curse. But on the opposite spectrum, so my mom was a single mother, right? She was raising 4 kids and we were poor. We were broke all the time. And her mindset became a poverty mindset. And it was always like, I don't know how these people have all this money, and it's impossible to get this money, and blah 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 blah. It was always something along the lines of like, we had to save money, you're never going to have a lot of money. And I also wanted to break that. I knew that in my mind, and for a while I would, and I'd have success in my life, but I would then see those thoughts constantly coming back into my head that, well, that's not meant to last. You can't just have these things. You can't just be successful because that's not who I am. And so it's actually something that's taking me this long in my life to like work through with God on completely breaking that out of my life, where yes, I am meant to have success. I am meant to have good things. I am meant to create the life that I want to have because God wants us to have that. God wants us to prosper. And obviously to remain humble and remain good along with it, and generous, and understanding that all things are from him. So technically, if we have money, it's God's money. But my point is, like, I watched that mindset carry over throughout my life until I was able to break it through God's word.
I'll speak to some generational curses my wife and I have actively talked about that we're going to just break. I don't want to make them even out to be like generational curses in the sense that we think our parents are cursed and acting like wicked. But I'm going to more point to them a little bit like less starkly and just be, these are just behaviors that we see that we're going to just do differently as we raise our kids. And one of them is going to be the materialism thing. We actually watched a documentary like 10 years ago when we were first starting out getting married. And it was about like minimalism. And not that we live minimalistically, but like we actually try. Like we don't have a house full of just like wall-to-wall furniture where there's like a coffee table on every single end of each couch or anything like that. Our house feels like a little more airy and open. And you could look at it and just like, oh, it's just your decoration style. But like when you really get into it, we don't have like a storage unit full of just crap. We've always been able to unpack every moving box within like a week of moving. We're not one of those people that just has so much stuff that it just inevitably finds itself in boxes for ages and ages and ages. We have less overall things. We keep things that we either have like very, very deep, significant emotional value, which are very rare, or things that we're actually going to use or need. And other than that, if we haven't we kind of have a rule: if we haven't touched something in a while, barring it being like a seasonal type thing, whether it's like a winter coat or Christmas decorations, if we haven't touched it in like, I think it's like 2 months or a month, we're gonna get rid of it. And we do. And so we have a thrift store just down the street, and so we're always there, like just tossing stuff as we can. So this materialism thing is something, I'm not gonna call it a generational curse in my instance. I don't want to sound a little harsh in my opinion, but maybe we could just call it like a cultural anomaly from our parents that they tried to hand to us, that we're definitely like changing. There's others that I have too. I don't know if you guys care to hear them, but I can share a few other ways that we're just gonna, maybe you could call it changing the way we live versus what we saw. If you want me to share, I could.
Yeah, sure for it.
All right. Well, one of them is like how we view debt and like living with debt. We're gonna like try to not have any debt. My parents actually were really good about this. They actually had their house paid off by the time I was in middle school. They had to refinance it. We had like a big sewer issue, and so with that money, they had to do some major sewer work and get a new driveway because they had to dig it to get into the sewer. They enclosed a carport to make it a garage and then extended it to make a carport on the edge of the existing already now garage. And so they had some like value to their house with it, but then they paid it off like really well. And I thought that was really cool. So in a way, like that's not even that's a blessing, a generational blessing that we see with my parents that we kind of want to do. So we've consolidated all our debt and we just have mortgage that we're working on, but we're actively hitting it extra, trying to get out from under it as quick as possible. We read a statistic: if you make a 13th or one extra entire payment a year, you can shave 13 years off of your mortgage, which is like pushing half, which is pretty amazing if you can just make that one extra a year. So do 13 payments for a 12-month cycle. It's a statistic I've read, and so that's something what we're trying to do. I guess that's keeping a generational blessing. Let's just call that. Yeah.
Yeah, I honestly, I think that's really good advice. If I were to offer anything that something I heard recently, and Josh can back this up because I think you even bought. Did you buy Victorious Emotions, Josh, by Wendy Backlund?
Yeah.
And I can't remember because there's two books that I've read by her, but she also did a podcast that we featured on the show. She talked about, her example was that she would go to church every week and go to this like women's group, and there was this one woman who just drove her crazy to the point where sometimes she'd leave the meeting and be like, I forgot something at home, and she'd ditch out for most of the meeting and come back so she'd have to be around this woman. And as she was praying about this, like God confronted her and be like, you think that her negativity has more power than what I give you inside of you? And she talked about like evil strongholds, like generational curses. And she's like, stop building these evil generational curses in you. Start remembering that God built strongholds in you too. So you need to start building that daily, whether reading your Bible and praying and being around other believers. And then you can start building up these strongholds inside of you that when you get in these environments where generationally you'll have somebody who just always kind of oppresses things and brings things down, you need to be that light and realize that light can't exist where there's darkness, or darkness can't exist where there's light. And so you need to push out darkness. I'm not saying change the person, but you can outshine that whole darkness in your life. And I think that's one thing that I've struggled to do, especially with the current events we just described. And you go out in this world and like people don't want you to shine right now. They do not want your light of God to shine through. It just bugs them for some reason. They just want you to be happy. You got to be altogether depressed. And so I think that's one way to stop these oppressive feelings and stop saying I'm just doomed because of my family and this is how I was raised and we're just never going to become anything.
And that's where I'd go back to that proverb scripture too, because like if people aren't really willing to introspectively like, and you can with love like approach them with what you just said and like try to instill like some hope, some faith, help them want to build godly strongholds within themselves. If they're not willing to do that, then like at the end of the day, you could just say to them, well, yeah, because you believe that and you're unwilling to change, like then you're right. Unfortunately, that's the truth, because like as you believe in your heart for one good thing, if you believe in your heart for bad things, it's true. Without that opportunity of the Spirit to work in you, to mold and shape you, and understand who you are with God through His Word and the Spirit, like really, yeah, you will be subjugated to things around you unless you really realize what you have inside you, or what you could have if you got born again.
What about repeat bad decisions for generational curses? Do you guys have any real life examples for that? I have one I can start with right off the get because we already talked about it. Was my drinking alcohol? I never considered it to be always a negative. It was for me. I saw it as a way that certain people in my family used themselves to reward themselves at the end of the day. And then I joined the Marine Corps and we and Josh, and like literally every day was pretty. It had its rough days, and some days weren't as bad. But almost every single day, you can justify drinking a beer, and you've earned it. And so every day I got home from work, when I was single, I definitely was rewarding myself. And as I got married, it became this confrontation in my family where I'm rewarding myself my daily way I'm used to. It started causing friction in my family without being said. And so it built and it built and it built. And I just kept on telling myself, like, I'm not addicted to this. I can quit at any time, but I wasn't doing it. And it became this thing where finally I broke down and just was like, God, if you want me to stop, and I've shared this so many times already, literally the next time I drank and every time I even touch alcohol, I feel so terrible the next day. And I'm like, God, you're reminding me. I remember I got to stop repeating these bad decisions so that my kids can watch me get through a hard day or not reward myself through alcohol and have it be for very special occasions and rare. And, just, they don't see me be altered in the way I talk to them or the way I act. What about you guys? Any repeat bad decisions that you see?
Yeah, mine. And I think this is very common in our society right now, and a lot of people don't even want to admit it. But I would use corn in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so, stressful day, whatever, it was more of like an anxiety relief than the actual lust aspect. And I did for a very long time, would use it. And then, once I started walking with God, started really learning the word, I realized how bad it was for me and actually started to recognize how it affects relationships and affected things that I didn't even recognize that it was affecting. And honestly, I'm so fortunate because I've seen so many people at church and in men's group and stuff struggle continuously with it. But I prayed on it and I said, God, break this chain now in my life. I need you right now. And literally the impulse for it was removed immediately. I haven't looked at it once since that prayer that day, and nor have I had an urge or an impulse whatsoever to.
That's the crazy one too, is because even when we were kids, I didn't know many girls that, you know what code for corn is, right, Trevor? You know what we're talking about?
It did take me a minute. When you go back to replay it, as soon as he says the word, you'll see my face like.
So you can get your video flagged.
That's weird.
The corn can be bad for you.
You're not allowed to say it on camera.
Yeah. I think you can sometimes. We're figuring out the rules. We're just trying to follow what we've seen by other people. But the thing
I don't call it that short word either. I use the whole with the gruffy part at the end.
Okay.
Of the word, yeah. Pornography, because that's.
I think objectively, when we're talking about it, YouTube won't flag you. But if you talk about it in different contexts, sometimes your video will get flagged or whatever.
I see where you're coming from, but at the same time, I don't think we're looking at this analytically, spiritually, scientifically.
Mm-hmm.
Pornography is the proper term. I wouldn't even call it porn because I think that just makes it colloquialized and acceptable. Personally, that's just me. I will not judge that or impose that on you, but just to be absolutely clear, I use the term pornography as pornography, but I'll do whatever you need me to do, however you want me to call it.
What I was gonna say though,
it took me a second. I was like 2 seconds went by after someone said it, and then you'll see on my camera like Trevor got it.
This is what he's talking about.
Sorry.
What I was gonna say though is what I have seen though is that young women are getting caught up into it now, where I think when we were younger, I didn't hear a lot or even meet girls that ever watched it. Where now that's being introduced to them. And I do believe that it is part of the problem in society today that we're facing is this insatiable lust that the devil's bringing, that it's like a drug where you start off simple and then it's just going to get more and more extreme. And I think that has led to some of the generational curses, if we're going to talk about that, like people's sexuality, like just what they're open to and what they will accept in their life. Because if if you've become susceptible to something on a video, how are you going to judge somebody else who's doing it in real life?
Yeah, I think with women especially though, for them it's literature based. You're seeing a lot of these like dark romanticides, dark implying that it's like very sexualized. Romantic romanticides is this new term coming around. So they're these just fictitious novels essentially, and they can be themed around different types of topics, eras, or just like sci-fi, even just way out there. But they're very graphic, and they're portraying things that are, because women are very emotional creatures. We could all agree, I'm sure. And so what I'm seeing a lot of on social media is this kind of thing is how women will satiate their desires is through literature, if you will. Instead of like men, we're very visual, of course. And so when we look at things lustfully, we literally are looking at a body, a shape of a body, and whatever clothing or lack thereof, in whatever position. For women, it's an emotional story and a relationship, and then it's reading words, storytelling, what's happening, let's just say, behind the scenes. So either way, it's there. Lust is a huge thing. There's, I don't know how many different sites to go to date people with like no commitment type stuff. It started with like websites like Tinder, or I don't know any others really, but I'm sure there's a bunch out there now. Occasionally I'll see an ad come up still, and I'm like, why is this even popping up on my stuff? We're inundated with sex too, just even on like social media. Yeah,
It's not even like just the sites like that. It's like I think you were getting that, and I'm sorry to cut you off. I just there was a period of time when me and my wife were going through a hard time, and we were not close to each other that way. And I just remember when I'm not with my wife that way, it started to point out everything that is sexualized in our environment today. And it's like billboards, it's TV commercials, it's everywhere all at once, all the time. You literally can't escape it.
Yeah, and it's because it sells, first of all, and second, it's just a great entrapment of the enemy. I mean, it's one of the best ones there is. For men, when they do it, it makes it so that we won't like pursue like healthy relationships with women like the right way, where you start courting and dating and ask them to marry, and then you can go and pursue those sexual desires within the bonds of matrimony the way God intended. And second, there's this culture that goes along with it too, which is hookup culture. So people are having multiple partners, and disease is being spread, and lives are literally being destroyed, children out of wedlock, and then trying to figure out how that's going to look between two parents that don't even really love each other and never did. They just lusted after each other for a single moment. And it's a wonderful play by the enemy. He's doing a tremendous job, but we are more powerful. We've got to recognize it as a psyop from the devil, and that's all it is. And we need to understand and hold to God's word and never venture down these dark routes, whether it's addictions to substances or addictions to bodily pleasures of other kinds.
Is there anything else we want to add on this right now, guys? Because I think the next segment is going to lead into how we can combat all this.
I think I'm ready to hear how we can combat it, because we recognize the issues, we recognize the problem, and we recognize who they're coming from.
Okay. So Josh, since I wanted to get into I've heard the armor of God so many times, and I really was thinking about recently me and Josh have a Bible study together, and I've mentioned before the devil's present in the New Testament. He approaches Jesus when he's doing his 40 days in the desert, and he tempts him with the world and other things. And then part where he tells Peter, "Get away from me, devil," when he's trying to stop him from wanting to go through with being crucified. And then we all know what happened with Judas. Like, he obviously was even possessed by the devil in his presence. So if the devil can be in people near Jesus, our God, how prevalent is he in our lives with even followers of people who wear the armor of the evil one? Like, it's basically either he's wearing it and then using people, or they're putting it on themselves to influence you. I made this little graphic for everyone on screen to see, and I'll put it on there right now. You guys have it on your phones. Josh, I'm going to ask you of a Bible verse, but if it's not Ephesians 6, 10 through 17, you're wrong.
Okay. Well,
I'm joking.
I'll take that a whole different level. I've got Ephesians 6:10-18.
Woo!
So, no, I'm sorry. I actually don't need to include 18, but I do have it screenshotted here. But no, I'm going to read the whole thing. It's a long one. So this is about the armor of God. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. And after you have done everything, to stand. Stand firm then, with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all of the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God.
So that being said, my examples were when Jesus was in the presence of some of his apostles, like they literally were trying to influence him, and he's like, "Get away from me, devil." I just started thinking like, it's kind of a mixed bag, right? Because it's the devil could be wearing this armor, but if he's controlling the other people, his armor is affecting the other people. And obviously it's going to be pretty clear, like if you put on the belt of truth, the opposite is the belt of lies. So like, how are we going to go through and start to having discernment when you're seeing these things in your life? Because lies, sin, fear, doubt, despair, deception, self-reliance, these are all opposite of what God wants from us. And we don't have to spend a ton of time on this. I just thought it was really coming full circle in these discussions about generational curses, people, how they've become products of their environment, how we've seen our society as a whole just deteriorate in the last 7 years, where we're like, that's a lot of stuff for us to not go out and face this world with this armor on. What do you guys think? That's it. All right, wrap it up.
I got quite a bit here. So I'm looking at the armor of the enemy. Here looking at this, that you did a great job on this, by the way. First of all, but I think at the end of the day, with that Bible verse, we just need to realize a few things. So we already have, being co-heirs with Christ, seated at the right hand of the Father with Christ. Satan can't do anything once we are there and know who we are and our identity. He can't do anything but try to deceive us and make us step off of the throne and away from what we already have. And I think that's one of the most important things to remember when we talk about whoever the enemy is, whatever weapons in the bag he has. He really only has one weapon, and that is deception. That's the only, once you're a born again believer, you understand who you are. Hopefully it's a very deep knowledge of that understanding of who you are, what you have, that faith of a mustard seed, and you've developed the soil, which is your heart, and it's strong and it's growing really well. You really understand the word, where it stands with you, and you're doing the things you need to do to keep and maintain your faith and look through all these psyops that are pushed against us. It's all just deception. So the devil only really has deception, because otherwise we're already there. Again, just to repeat it, we're already seated at the right hand of the Father with Christ. We have the Spirit to help us discern, fiction from truth. And he's just going to present himself as a roaring lion. He is not a roaring lion. He's just presenting himself as pushing the fear. He's just trying to be loud. And he's just going to try to get in your face and try to move you off, as much or as little as he can, off the throne with which we already sit next to Christ.
Josh, how do you go about daily putting on the armor of God to defend yourself from this armor that the enemy wears?
For a while, I was literally praying to put on the armor of God every single morning in my morning prayer. And I felt like I was being attacked by the enemy a lot at that time. And I wanted to state that I was putting on that armor every morning. And I truly think it helped a lot. And I haven't been saying it in my morning prayers. But I feel like it's inherent now. like I know that I am putting it on because I'm remaining in the word every day. I'm praying every day. I'm walking in truth every day. When I know thoughts are coming into my head that are not from me or from God, I am capturing those thoughts. And I'm cutting them down with the sword, which is the word of God. I am using the truth that God gives us through his word to cut out the enemy's attacks. In each aspect of that armor, I feel like I'm living with it on, if that makes sense.
I do. Yeah. Trevor, do you want to say something? Sorry.
I was just gonna say the exact same thing at the end. It's almost like an armor that's obviously it's spiritual and you sleep with it, and then you use it throughout the day, like Josh said, and you replenish it and maintain it, polish it, keep it from rusting, metaphorically speaking, by staying in the word, meditating on who you are, meditating on the scriptures, reading your Bible, those things. I totally agree.
We did a episode on near death experiences recently when you were on, Trev, and there was a guy named Gabe Perot, and he was going into how important it is the words that come out of our mouth, that you don't get to see the ripple effect that you have in people's lives when you speak good upon them and evil as well. And he says, but he's like, you really have to be careful what comes out of your mouth, and Jesus tells us that. And I just remember the first time I heard about the armor of God. And then they're saying the sword, which is to me, the most typical male, like, yes, a sword. It was the Bible. And I'm like, what? Like, how does that make sense? But what Gabe's saying that Jesus told him, like, what comes out of your mouth is so important. Forgiveness is one of the things he said that was equally as important. I just think that's even more prevalent now to think if the words are coming out of your mouth, if you can, sometimes you don't have the best advice, but if you look for scripture will lead us through most of your problems. So I second what you guys are saying, like, getting in the word and maintaining it. Like I know when sometimes I don't feel like God's close to me, or I'm not feeling his presence the way I do when I'm really engaged and putting on the armor of God. I just have to go back to basics and start like putting on the armor daily and reminding myself, like, little things like me and my wife are starting to pray over each other in the morning before she leaves for work, and then when she comes home at night before we go to bed, we pray together. And like that's not something we've done all the time. We're doing it together, and it's like it's really bringing us close, and we're excited to see where this goes.
I agree. We had been introduced to teaching right as I was getting born again, and a lot of it stemmed like on identity, and then turned into like, okay, when you have a good basis of your identity, how do you exude that and invoke that into the world to change it from like evil to good? Because everything is again spiritual, right? And so that was a big thing we were learning right out of the gate, was that your words will speak manifestation. You can rebuke demons and cast them out, but also you can call in a blessing. So like Jesus rebukes demons, a fruitless, deceiving fig tree gets cursed and it withers from the roots. It's a deceitful fig. If it's got leaves, it should produce fruit. And so that was an example beyond just how powerful your words are, but also that we should be producing that fruit. And we produce that fruit with our mouths as well. We speak kindly into people's lives, whether to their faces or behind their backs. We speak prayers and we speak good things to people and bless them with our words and our hands. And then we hopefully, see the fruits of that in our lifetime. Just, it's a great little motivator. But at the same time, that's okay if we don't. We will never see all the good we've sown into someone's life. And that's kind of the fun too, is we get to heaven and get to share stories with hopefully other people that we've encountered in this life and the ways that we've impacted each other and love on them and be grateful we're there together.
Yeah, that's always interesting to me, exactly what you just said, Trevor, about when we get to heaven and get to have those as gifts, as surprises. But how you brought up the near-death experience, Steve, I've listened to so many of them now just because they're uplifting. I love them. But very common in a lot of them is the life review they go through when they get to heaven. And they said it's over in a blink of an eye, but at the same time, it takes forever. You see your entire life again. And that just goes to, there is no time in heaven. So, but my point of that is just that right there, they say that's where they experience that, like, at this point in my life, I did this kind thing for someone and I had no idea that it was important. I never thought about it again, but they experience that, and they experience it from the other person's perspective of how much it meant to that person, how good it felt, how loving it was. And that's the reward they receive during that life review. But on the other side of it, they get to also experience when they did speak words of death into someone's life, words of pain, and they get to experience that from the other perspective also.
I think we need to guard our hearts because that guards our tongue. I've seen born again believers react very poorly to like medical circumstances, and then they share it with everybody, or in the heat of the moment, right as 911 was showing up, or loading someone up to go to the hospital to take them down because they had some sort of a major medical issue. And I've heard people say things, and I know they were born again people, and they said something along the lines of, "Well, this is good. This is going to be the death of him," or something like that, or and you could just see the worry, the panic, the way, and they're getting snippy, they're getting angry. There's no faith, there's no love, there's no real like strength spiritually speaking there at all. That's like those times when you really see people for who they are. And that's the problem too, is I'm far from perfect, and I've even in my born again times had some poor interactions with people for sure. But I'm still trying and I'm still working on that. And I think you really start to see rubber hitting the road with where someone's really at when those situations get presented to them. Personally, I've seen myself grow. Like, we used to freak out right before I was born again. I remember like I had a flat tire, like my tire just got shredded up on something, and we didn't have $100 to spare to like fix it, get a new tire, just one tire. And now it's like I could, and that's, maybe you could say, oh, well, your finances have changed. Well, first, our attitude and our tongues changed. What we thought and what we spoke about who we are and our circumstances very much changed. And then our finances changed to the point where a new car isn't even like a big deal. Like if my car caught fire in the middle of the street and we were all safe, like I really wouldn't care. Not because I have insurance and I'll be okay. That's still a headache, and probably I won't get what it was worth. Even if insurance didn't even cover it, like I just don't care. Like it's just not my problem. Put all the care onto the Lord, for he cares for you. And that's where I've grown to. And I'm still far from where I want to be. And I still might make mistakes when big things happen, whether medical or physical or interpersonal or whatever. I'm not thinking I will, hopefully, but I don't know what the future holds, but I endeavor to keep this armor polished and ready to go.
100%. I know it wasn't like the most clever thing in the world to create a graphic of just doing the exact opposite of what the armor of God is. Like, wow, where'd you come up with this, Steve? But I do think it is important to look at the things that the enemy will use against you. And I think like, and one of the things I think, I've met people and even myself, because I was raised in a Mormon family. I knew who God was. I believed, I prayed every day. I didn't go to church anymore. But I know as I was coming back to church and religion again, there was a lot of things in my life that sin that I wasn't giving up. And we touched on some of that stuff today. I think like the one of the biggest things that the enemy does is he puts us on that belt of lies. And the lies is going to start with like who you think you are. And you got to start thinking about not who you think you are, but think of you through God's eyes. Because he doesn't see the lies that the enemy's bringing into this world. And sometimes you need to start like understanding that you're not going to find a perfect point in your life to give up who you were. There won't be a perfect point if you live your life that way. You just got to make a decision to give your life to Jesus. And once you do that, it will start a process of changing things that will be out of your control in a way if you give your life to Jesus and put on the armor of God every day, the way that Josh was describing. Like, it's really important. And Josh has brought up plenty of times in our past, sanctification. And he's mentioned it about my struggles. He's like, sanctification. And I always like kind of go, I'm no saint. I'm not do not look at me that way. But if you look at me over the last, like, because Josh has watched me and Trevor's watched me, like, I am changing slowly, but it's drastic. My kids are seeing it, and I want to be walking out with my kids wearing that armor of God daily, even when I mess up, because sin is just missing the bullseye. That's all it means, is you didn't make it perfect, and nobody was perfect except for Jesus. So you're not trying to be Jesus, you're just trying to walk with him. So when you miss that mark, you get to just stop and say, I didn't hit the mark, I got to go back. And you just start changing your life again, even when you mess up.
I think the parable of the prodigal son is imperative to really, really understand. Coming back to the part where the son comes back and he gets to be celebrated, the law, the do-gooders that do good just to say that they're obeying God's command, and this was me totally, especially in my experience growing up as a Mormon, was I was that older brother. Like, I would look at people that had like maybe more success than me, but I was like, but I did everything I was supposed to do. Why am I not successful? What we need to understand is, once we truly just understand who we are in Christ, we're co-heirs and all that. Whether we've done stuff or will do stuff in the future that take us away from God through sin, you just repent and you come right back, and then you just collect the ring, and you get the Father's cloak to cover your shame. He takes that from us. Literally, he gives. The ring is sometimes, allegorically speaking, like the signet ring. The ring of the power in the ring is like the kings would have rings of old, and they would use it to put wax on a letter and then put the signet ring down to make the seal. And you knew, oh, this came from the king, or whoever's signet ring, this came from that particular person. So when the father took off the ring to give it to his prodigal son, he's saying, I'm giving you everything back, even though you took half the inheritance and squandered it and lived frivolously with it in wickedness. You come back and you repent, and you're golden, you're good again. And there's not this quantifier of what you need to do or show that you just repented and it's just done. You're clean. And it's hard for us to comprehend that, I think, as humans. Like, we think there needs to be punishments affixed and things, and sometimes there are. Like, if you go do something with a person sexually, like, you might have long-lasting consequences, whether medical or create a baby, and you can't escape sometimes the consequences. But through God, like, you can still overcome all of that and be forgiven.
With the story of the prodigal son, I just want to add, when the son comes walking back and he's holding his head in shame, and he's, inside, he's fearing what's going to happen when he gets to his dad. Is he going to be approved or accepted at all? Is he even going to be allowed to be a slave to his father at this point? But he never even has to get there. The father comes running out to meet him where he's at. And that's God to us. Every time we screw up, every time we're hanging our head in shame, he's running towards us saying, I'm here. I approve. I still love you. And I still want to give you everything that I promised you. Just change your ways. And it's something that I think about often. Like, I try to have that visual of he's coming to me. Like, he wants to meet me where I'm at. I don't have to run to him and beg.
One of my favorite. Mine was short. One of the things I like to point out when that story gets brought up is the brother who gets mad when his brother comes back, and his dad starts doing all these things for him. You need to remember to rejoice for those people coming back, because of the symbolism of it all. Like, you don't want to be that person. It's like, you did all these bad things. You're not welcome here again. You don't get the celebration. That's for me. Don't be that person. And what are you gonna say, Trev?
I was gonna say, this kind of really closes everything up for the day, because I wanted to speak to the viewer, whether we're talking about generational issues, generational curses. At the end of the day, we need to be the Lord's and the Lord's alone. And then with that, we exude his love to others. We offer kindness and understanding to everyone we meet. And yeah, there's worldly problems out there. Again, whether it's some generation screwed something up, or just individually in your own life up the generational lines, got some sort of a problem they brought into the family, some sort of generational curse. Honestly, like, at the end of the day, none of that really matters. You just be Christ's, you make yourself his, you get born again, you get filled with the Spirit, all is forgiven immediately at that point, and then really start just cherishing what he's really, and understanding first of all, because then you'll just cherish what he's given you. Deliverance from addiction, from erroneous thinking patterns, all of it is correctable, amendable by God. Sometimes immediate, and sometimes it might take a while to work through some of the imperfections.
Amen.
Amen.
Josh, do you have any final words for us, Josh? Like, you want to close with anything?
Yeah, I guess along those same lines, and I'm just looking over the last topic we talked about, and that was the armor of the enemy that you were talking about. But in this, you bring up lies, you bring up doubt, despair, deception, self-reliance, and I just want to speak to probably to other believers, and even if you're not a believer right now, I just want to remind you to walk in authority, that Jesus promised us the opposite of all of those things. And so when you are allowing doubt into your life, you're not having faith. You are not being faithful to what Jesus gave us. He overcame all of it. And when we believe that, and we can understand that, and we can see that in our day to day, we have no reason to doubt. We have no reason to fear. We have no reason to speak negative words, to even have negative thoughts. We have everything through Jesus. We have it all. And you have to walk in that power and authority, and trust and know that God is there with you in everything you do. Really, that's kind of my final thoughts there for today.
Trevor, I have one question for you, and it's from last episode.
Sure.
Have you seen Indiana Jones or Star Wars before?
Yeah, I've seen them. I think almost all of them. Yeah.
Okay, Josh, you're the only one that's never seen it.
I have seen parts of all of it.
I joke, but I guess I want to make you guys laugh before we got off, and I just wanted to let the viewers know that this is fellowship. It's also when two or more believers get together, it's church. So this is essentially his church and it's fellowship, and we hope that whoever watches this, say hi in the comments. We want to say hi. We'll ask that you like, subscribe, or share, or whatever you do on the YouTube, just so we can get this out to other people who might not have it. So our goal is to bring people to Jesus and show what a redeemed life can look like, or as you're working on being redeemed, like myself, like that sanctification process. I'm sharing who I am. I'm being vulnerable. And I really appreciate the guys I get to do this with, my cousin and one of my best friends. This is really special, and I really appreciate you guys.
And really, I just want to, oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, I think too, just as listeners, bring us any questions or ideas for topics going forward too, or if we need to elaborate on anything. We'd love to interact with you listeners a little bit more so we can understand exactly how we can help you, or what other things that you're seeing that we haven't even seen that we need to bring up into this discussion.
Absolutely. I was going to justify my not seeing those movies really quick before we walk away. I just want the viewer to know it's not some oh, geez, he's not watching those movies because he's a Christian. I don't want you to think that at all. It's because I had two older brothers who loved those movies, and I was just a stubborn little brat, and I wanted to always be nah, I'm not doing what you're saying. So that's really the only reason I ever saw those movies. Or I never saw those.
Did you see Lord of the Rings?
Yes, I love them.
Okay, all right.
That was past them. We were out of the house by then. So
okay, thank goodness. All right, guys. Well,
Josh stay then, since at least saw Lord of the Rings.
If there's anything else you guys want to add, if not, we can just say our goodbyes now.
No, we're good. I got a jet. Sorry.
Yeah,
it's going crazy.
All right, thank you guys. We love y'all.
Love you guys.
Bye, boys.
See you later, bud.
Bye.
Stop recording.